The first time this drama really grabbed me by the throat wasn't even a jump scare or a big line. It was that quiet, insane shot of a pristine Venus statue being wheeled into a climate-controlled gallery room like it's the most normal thing in the world. While the sound mix slips in something you almost don't register as human at first. A faint, wet breath, like fogging glass. And for half a second, you're sitting there thinking, no, don't do that. Don't tell me what I think you're telling me. And that's the exact kind of cruel confidence my daughter was hidden in a statue is working with. Welcome back to Flick Flare. You already know I live for a drama that commits to its premise so hard it makes you feel slightly unsafe on your own couch. And this one absolutely does. Quick, gentle nudge. If you like long, emotional, very detailed drama breakdowns, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And for spoilers, today I'm doing moderate spoilers. We're going deep on the setup, the early turns, and the craft choices that make it hit. But I'm not going to spell out the late-game endgame reveals or exactly where everyone lands. I'll point at the cliff edges without pushing you off them. So here's the core nightmare, and the show doesn't waste time dressing it up. Elena Vale is the daughter of Helena Vale, Helena being this terrifyingly composed, impossibly wealthy figure in the city of Larkhave, where money doesn't just talk, it dictates zoning laws, marriages, funerals, and which truths get to exist in public. Elena is the good heir, not the spoiled kind. She's the philanthropic one, the one who smiles like she actually means it, the one who argues with her mother about worker protections and still kisses her on the cheek afterward. The drama makes sure you like Elena first, because it wants the violation to feel personal. And then, Elena is replaced. Quietly, efficiently, with an imposter who looks like her, moves like her in the broad strokes, but misses the micro-music of being her. And while the fake Elena is taking meetings, waving at cameras, and letting the corrupt mayor drape himself over the Vale name, the real Elena is somewhere else entirely. Brutally mutilated, sealed alive inside a Venus statue for 3 months. 3 months. That number sits in your chest like a stone the entire time. Because even when the show cuts away, you can't unknow it. If you're wondering whether the drama goes full torture porn with that concept, it doesn't. It's graphic in implication, not indulgence. And that's one of the smart-ass decisions it makes. It uses texture, sound, and absence. It lets your imagination do the screaming, which, unfortunately, means you scream louder. And before we even get into the conspiracy mechanics, can we just appreciate the audacity of making a statue the locked room? We've had trunks, walls, basements, shipping containers. But a Venus statue, displayed in public, worshipped as art, and literally hiding a person? That's not just horror. That's theme. That's the drama saying, this city has been admiring cruelty and calling it culture for a long time. Hold on to that, because it keeps paying off in small, nasty ways. Now, Helena. Helena is the engine. She's the kind of character where you believe she's never lost a negotiation in her life. And if she did, she'd purchase the concept of losing and bankrupt it. The performance, Lee Harron plays her with this controlled, glacial fury. Lands because she doesn't do the obvious melodrama. When Helena panics, she doesn't shatter. She goes quieter. Her voice drops. Her face becomes still. And everyone around her starts talking faster, like they can fill the space before she decides what to do to them. Here's the thing that surprised me. The first episodes aren't about Helena knowing. They're about Helena sensing. She's watching her daughter and noticing little fractures. The way fake Elena holds a fork like she's been taught from a handbook. The way she pauses before answering personal questions like she's searching a database. The way she touches Helena's shoulder, too long, too performative, and then watches for approval like a politician. It's such a specific kind of wrong, and the director lingers on it with these tight, almost claustrophobic close-ups that make you feel like you're trapped at the dinner table with them. And yes, the imposter storyline could have gone silly. It could have become spot the villain acting. But the drama is way more interested in discomfort than caricature. The actress playing Elena, Seogn, does something genuinely impressive here, because she's playing Elena and fake Elena as two different rhythms inside the same skin. Real Elena has this effortless warmth in her eyes, like she's always listening. Fake Elena blinks a half-beat too late, smiles like she's practiced it in a mirror. When she laughs, there's no air in it. It's dry, polite. And if you've ever been around someone who's mirroring you instead of meeting you, that performance hits like a cold hand on your spine. But okay, let's talk about the mayor, because I know you can feel him coming like a smell. Mayor Victor Kessler is the kind of corruption the city has normalized. He's not a mustache twirler. He's clean suits, public school funding speeches, and private backroom deals. He calls Helena my dear friend on camera, and calls her a ledger with legs off camera. He has that predator talent of being charming to people who don't threaten him and vicious to anyone who does. And what the show nails is how Victor doesn't feel like an outsider villain. He feels like a natural product of Revirw, this polished rot. The production design is doing heavy lifting here. His office is all pale wood and glass, very transparency, while the lighting keeps casting these subtle bar shadows across him, like he's always behind something. Even when he's standing in open space, the frame cages him. Not because he's trapped, because he's the trap. Now, here's a question that the drama dangles early and keeps tightening. Why replace Elena at all? Why not just kill her? And that's where the plot starts to show its teeth. Elena isn't just a daughter. She's a signature. She's a living key to Helena's empire, charity foundations, art patronage boards, a controlling share of Vale Biotech held in a trust that requires Elena's presence for certain transfers. The fake Elena isn't there to pretend. She's there to authorize, to smile and sign while the city is quietly stolen out from under Helena. And when you realize that, the statue becomes even more monstrous. Because the point isn't simply to hurt Elena. The point is to keep Elena alive, but erased, breathing proof hidden inside something everyone applauds. If you're thinking, okay, so Helena just goes nuclear immediately, the drama does something more patient. It lets Helena try the reasonable path first, which is honestly scarier because it shows you the system is built to absorb reason and spit out nothing. She goes to Police Chief Hamyong-seok, an old acquaintance, a man who used to owe her favors back when he still had ideals. And he gives her sympathy like it's a cup of tea. Warm, useless. He says there's no evidence of kidnapping, no sign of forced entry. And Elena is right there, smiling at charity events. He suggests Helene is stressed, grieving, overreacting. And that's when the show starts its central emotional cruelty. It makes Helene feel crazy for being right. I need to give credit to the sound design in those scenes. Whenever Helena is alone with fake Elena, there's this subtle thinning of ambient noise. The room tone fades. The clink of silverware gets too sharp. The music pulls back like it's holding its breath. The show is literally sonic gaslighting you alongside her, forcing you into this hyper-attentive, almost paranoid listening mode. I caught myself leaning forward, like I could hear what Helena hears. And I hated that it worked. Now let's get into the statue itself, because the way the drama reveals that horror is honestly masterclass. They don't start with Ellen inside. They start with the art world. Episode 1 opens on this gala. Venus Resurgent, a new centerpiece commissioned by the Revirw Cultural Council. Cameras, champagne, philanthropy smiles. Helena arrives with Elena, real Elena, on her arm. And there's this brief tenderness between them in the corridor before they step into the flashbulbs. Elena squeezes Helena's hand once. Like, we can do this together. It's such a small gesture, and it becomes a ghost later. Then Elena disappears between the corridor and the main hall. Not dramatically. No scream. Just gone. The camera stays with Helena as she turns, expecting Elena to be there, and the space is subtly wrong. Like when you reach for a light switch that isn't where it's always been. The music doesn't spike. It drops out. and the only sound is the distant applause for the statue reveal. That cut, Helena's face, the applause, the statue being unveiled made my stomach turn. Because the show is telling you, in pure cinema language, that everybody is cheering for the container of your daughter's suffering. And then it doesn't explain. It lets you sit in that nausea. And when we finally see the real Elena's perspective, it's not immediate. It's delivered in these fractured flashbacks that feel like the brain protecting itself. A hand over her mouth. The smell of plaster dust. A floor so cold it burns. A woman's voice, calm, almost kind, saying, "Hold still. This is for the city." And later, the inside of darkness with a thin seam of light like a cruel little promise. The drama takes a huge swing here with the timeline. 3 months of Elena being missing, but the public never sees a missing person. They see a functioning Elena, because fake Elena steps into place within days. And the mayor's office pushes a narrative about Elena retreating from the public due to stress, while still making sure she appears at select events, carefully controlled, carefully photographed, never close enough for spontaneous conversation. That's where the imposter performance becomes not just acting, but choreography. The show stages these public events like theater. Fake Elena stands at the exact center of every frame. Her aides, especially a chilling PR director named Sarah Min, move people like furniture to keep her protected. When someone tries to approach Elena with familiarity, Sarah intercepts with a laugh and a hand on the elbow. The camera often shoots those moments from behind glass, through reflections, through phone screens. The drama is constantly reminding you this Elena is mediated, curated, protected by layers. And Helena? Helena starts collecting wrongness like evidence. She tests her. She brings up a childhood memory about Elena stealing jasmine blossoms from the neighbor's garden, and fake Elena smiles and says, "You always said I was fearless." But real Elena would have corrected her. "I wasn't fearless. I was hungry." And you see it hit Helena, just this tiny tightening around her eyes. She doesn't react outwardly. She stores it. This is where I'm going to make a slightly contrarian point, because the obvious reading is, fake Elena is pure evil, a monster wearing a face. But the drama doesn't actually play her that way if you pay attention. Fake Elena, her real name is Mara Sorrell, we learn later, has these moments where she looks not guilty, exactly, but haunted, like she's walking through someone else's life and it's starting to infect her. There's a scene in episode 3 where she sits in Elena's bedroom alone, running her fingers across a row of framed photos, and the camera stays wide. No music, just the soft hum of the house. And Mara's expression isn't triumphant. It's hollow, almost grieving, which doesn't absolve her, obviously. But it does something more interesting. It suggests the conspiracy doesn't just use people. It eats them. And that's the drama's wider thesis, honestly. In a city built on power, everyone is a statue in progress, posed, polished, hollowed out. Okay, but when Helena finally moves from suspicion to action, it's delicious. She stops asking questions in rooms where other people control the walls. She hires her own investigator, Jain Park, a former federal prosecutor who retired after poking the wrong billionaire. Jain is one of my favorite supporting characters because the show doesn't make him a superhero. He's tired. He's got a limp. He drinks too much espresso and not enough water. He's not brave in a shiny way. He's brave in a reluctant way, like someone who knows exactly what power does and still decides to step into its teeth. Their partnership is electric because Helena doesn't trust easily, and Jain doesn't flatter. In their first real meeting, Helena says, "I want my daughter back," and Jain replies, "Then stop pretending this is a missing person case. This is a regime." And Helena just stares at him, like she's deciding whether to hire him or destroy him for speaking truth in her presence. The scene ends with her sliding a black card across the table and saying, "Tell me who I need to buy." And Jain, without blinking, says, "We're not buying." We're documenting. It's such a clean statement of the show's tension. Helena's instinct is domination, but the enemy is a system that thrives on domination. She can't just out-brute force it without becoming it. And yes, Helene is rich. Like control sports rich. The drama has fun with it sometimes in a way that made me snort despite myself. There's a moment where she's trying to quietly access a restricted building blueprint, and her assistant says, dead serious, the architect's firm refuses to release it. Helena doesn't even look up. She says, by the firm. That's it. Just by the firm. I laughed, then immediately felt bad for laughing, which is kind of the Helena experience in a nutshell. But the show never lets her wealth become a cheat code. Because the mayor's circle isn't just wealthy. They're entrenched. They have judges, police, hospitals, media, museums. Helene can purchase objects. They control narratives. And the most horrifying part of this drama is watching how easily a narrative can bury a person. There are sequences in episode 4 that I still think about. Helene goes to a hospital records department trying to confirm whether Eleanor has had any medical visits in the last 3 months. The clerk is polite, incompetent, slow. System is down. We need additional verification. Helena finally leans in and says, very softly, call your supervisor. The clerk goes pale and does. And 2 minutes later, security arrives, not to help Helena, but to escort her out because the mayor's office has flagged her as distressed and potentially disruptive. That's when it clicks. They weaponized concern against her. They're not just hiding Elena. They're building a public case that Helena is unstable, an unfit mother, a dangerous billionaire losing control. That theme, women being labeled hysterical the moment they're inconvenient, runs under everything, and the drama doesn't underline it with speeches. It just keeps showing you doors closing with smiles. And meanwhile, in the shadows of the art world, the Revirw statue starts to become its own character. It's by a celebrity sculptor named Lucien Kell, European, charismatic, always filmed in soft light like a saint of aesthetics. He speaks about beauty and stillness and the purity of form. And the show frames him like an icon, low angels, halo lighting, his hands coated in white dust like communion. It's so intentional, because later, every time he says the word beauty, you feel sick. One of the most cinematic mini-sequences in the first half is the flashback to Eleanor's entombment. This is the scene that made me pause the episode and just stare at my own wall for a minute, no exaggeration. It's shot like a ritual. Eleanor is on the studio floor, the camera above her, the lighting cold and moon-like. You hear rain tapping against the skylight, steady as a heartbeat. Lucien's assistants move around her with calm efficiency. Someone wipes blood from Eleanor's lip like they're cleaning a sculpture. Someone measures her body with a tape, murmuring numbers. Eleanor is conscious enough to realize what's happening, and she tries to scream, but her throat is raw, and the only sound is this broken rasp that the sound design amplifies until it feels like it's inside your own throat. Then they lift the statue's hollow shell, this enormous, pristine Venus form, and the camera cuts to Eleanor's point of view as the world narrows into marble-colored darkness. The last thing she sees is Lucien's face leaning down, smiling gently, and saying, "You'll be perfect." The shell lowers. Light becomes a thin seam. The seam closes, and the rain keeps tapping like nothing happened. That's the scene where I had a very specific, very human reaction. I started breathing shallow, like my body was trying to conserve air for her. I don't always get that with thrillers. I can watch a lot, but something about being sealed alive, something about the calmness of it, hit a childhood fear I didn't realize I still had. So if you're sensitive to claustrophobic horror, just know this drama knows exactly how to press that nerve. Now, here's the part that makes the plot more than shock value. Eleanor isn't just suffering passively. The show gives her agency in the only way she has it: memory, will, and tiny physical actions that feel like miracles. We get these brief, brutal glimpses of her inside the statue, counting breaths, scratching a fingernail against the inner surface, pressing her ear to the shell to locate sound, trying to time the footsteps outside. The camera often goes macro, extreme close-ups of skin against stone, eyelashes trembling, moisture beading. It's intimate in a way that almost feels wrong to watch, but that wrongness is the point. You're not supposed to be comfortable consuming her pain as entertainment. And then the drama does one of its smartest structural tricks. It crosscuts Eleanor's silence with fake Eleanor's loudness. While Eleanor is fighting to stay conscious in a dark cavity, Mara is giving speeches about resilience and women's strength at charity luncheons. The irony is venomous. There's a scene where Mara stands in front of a banner that literally says "Voice of the Future," and the show cuts to Eleanor coughing in darkness. I actually muttered out loud, "Oh, that's evil," like the writers were in my living room. But the drama doesn't let you sit only in anger. It keeps complicating the emotional angels. Helena's grief is not clean. She's not just a mother. She's a woman who built her life on control, and now control is useless. She starts snapping at staff, accusing loyal people, making decisions that feel like overkill. There's a moment where her longtime driver, Mr. Revirw, gently suggests she should sleep, and Helena turns and says, "Sleep is for people whose children are safe." It's cruel, it's unfair, and it's honest. This show is brave enough to let trauma make its protagonist ugly sometimes. And Jain, to his credit, pushes back. He tells her, "Your rage is a flashlight. Point it carefully." That line could have been corny, but the actor, Khan Deho, delivers it like he hates that he has to be the steady one. Like he'd prefer to rage too, but he knows rage without direction gets people killed. Let's talk about the investigation threads, because this is where the drama starts building its conspiracy lattice. Helene and Jain follow three main trails in the first half: the art commission, the mayor's redevelopment plan, and the sudden reshuffling of Vale biotech shares. The editing rhythm shifts depending on which thread we're in. The art world scenes are slow, glossy, suffocating, lots of long takes, ambient classical music, museum lighting that makes everyone look waxy. The political scenes are fast, handheld, full of overlapping dialogue and phone vibrations. And the corporate scenes are sharp, sterile, almost silent, with fluorescent lighting that makes faces look tired and slightly green. It's a really effective way to make each sphere feel like its own ecosystem, even though they're all feeding each other. And yes, if you've watched a lot of conspiracy thrillers, you can predict some beats. But the show earns its tension through specificity. For example, Helena doesn't just get a clue. She gets stone dust in her house. There's a quiet scene in episode 5 where Helena is in Eleanor's bathroom, standing at the sink. It's late. The house is asleep. She turns on the faucet and watches water run, like she's trying to remember what normal life looks like. Then she notices a thin white residue along the drain, powdery, chalky. She rubs it between her fingers. The camera goes close. It's not face powder. It's not soap scum. It's stone. And something changes in her posture. Not panic. Certainty. She calls Jain, and the only thing she says is, "She's been near marble." Then she hangs up. That's the kind of writing I love. It's not a magical leap. It's a mother noticing the wrong dust in the wrong place and trusting her instinct over everyone else's denial. It's primal. It's terrifying. Now, because I promised moderate spoilers, I'm not going to walk you through every trapdoor the plot opens later. But I can talk about how the drama escalates its stakes without just stacking bodies for shock. It escalates by isolating Helena socially. The mayor's office starts leaking stories. Helena's erratic behavior, Helena's unfounded accusations, Helena's declining health. Fake Elena does this heartbreaking, infuriating press moment where she stands beside Victor Kessler and says, with tears that look almost real, "My mother is under immense stress. Please give her grace." The audience in world eats it up. Commentators call Helena a tyrant losing her grip. It's like watching a woman drown while people criticize her swimming technique. And Helena can't just scream, "That's not my daughter." Because if she does, she's accusing her own child in public. She's detonating her own family name. The show understands that constraint and milks it for agony. There's an episode-ending shot where Helena watches a TV segment about Elena's inspiring recovery, and Helena's reflection in the black screen looks like a ghost behind the broadcast. The score is this low cello note that just holds and holds until it feels like your ribs are vibrating. But here's a pivot that really kept me hooked. The drama introduces the idea that Elena herself left breadcrumbs before she was taken. Not on purpose, not like a spy, more like the natural traces of a person who was already suspicious of something. Elena had been working on a quiet internal audit of the Cultural Council's finances because she noticed donations vanishing into restoration budgets that never restored anything. She confided in one person outside the family, her childhood friend and now investigative journalist, Neela Hart. Neela is sharp, stubborn, and has that look of someone who sleeps under her desk more than in her bed. She becomes crucial because she's the only one who can move in the public narrative space without immediately being labeled bot. And I have to shout out the way the show frames Neela. When she's on screen, the color temperature warms slightly. The camera becomes more alive. There's more street noise, more real-world clutter. It's like the drama is visually telling you, this is what truth feels like. Messy, human, uncurated. That contrast matters, because so much of Larkhave is filmed like a showroom. Neela's storyline also gives us one of the few moments of gallows humor, and I appreciated it because the show is so heavy it needs air sometimes. There's a scene when Neela meets Helena in a parking garage, classic noir vibes, echoing footsteps, fluorescent flicker. Helena arrives with two bodyguards and a black car that probably costs more than my entire existence. Neela looks at it and goes, "Do you people ever just take a taxi like a normal villain?" Helena doesn't laugh, but Giant does this tiny cough laugh into his fist, and for half a second the tension breaks. It's a human moment. Then the dread comes right back, because Neela hands Helena a folder of receipts tied to the statue commission. And those receipts point to Lucien Kell's studio. Here's where the drama gets really nasty with its reversals. Helena thinks, okay, I'll go to the studio, I'll threaten him, I'll buy him, I'll expose him. But Lucien is protected not by guards with guns, but by legitimacy, by the museum, by the Cultural Council, by donors, by the mayor. If Helena storms in accusing him of entombing her daughter in his art, she becomes a crazy woman attacking a beloved artist. And the show makes you feel that trap closing. So Helena does something else. She hosts her own event. This is one of my favorite Helena power moves because it's both brilliant and deeply sad. She stages a private legacy dinner at the Valley estate, invites the same donors who worship Lucien, invites Cultural Council members, invites Victor Kessler, invites fake Elena. It's opulence weaponized, candlelight reflecting off crystal. A string quartet playing something so delicate it feels like it could slice skin. The dining table is long enough to look like a runway. Everyone is dressed like they're attending a funeral for their own souls. And Helena sits at the head like a queen who has decided the kingdom is guilty. The camera does this slow pan across faces as Helena speaks about family, about truth, about art that endures. She never accuses anyone directly. She just tells a story about a Roman myth, about a woman turned into stone while still conscious, still thinking, still feeling. And as she speaks, the editing cuts to fake Elena's face, and you see a flicker of fear that she can't fully hide. That flicker is the first time Mara looks like she might break. Then Helena stands, lifts her glass, and says, "To Venus." And everyone toasts, because of course they do. Because none of them want to be the first to not toast. And the drama holds on that image. Dozens of powerful people raising glasses to a statue metaphor until it becomes sickening. And right when you think Helena is just being theatrical, she drops the real blade. She announces she's pulling Wale funding from the Cultural Council effective immediately, citing accountability concerns, and she's launching an independent audit that will be made public. The room freezes. Victor Kessler's smile twitches. Lucien's eyes narrow. Fake Eleanor looks at Helena like she's seeing her for the first time. That's the moment the war becomes open, and the retaliation starts fast. Helena's accounts are temporarily frozen through routine compliance reviews. Her board members receive anonymous blackmail packages. Neela's apartment is broken into, but nothing is stolen, just her notes rearranged, a message in intimidation rather than theft. Jain gets tailed. The show does this really unsettling thing with the tailing scenes where the camera stays too far back. Like you're the one stalking them. You're made complicit visually, and it adds this constant skin-crawling paranoia. There's also this recurring motif, statues watching. Every time Helene walks through the city, the frame includes stone figures, museum pieces, courthouse carvings, decorative angels. The city is literally carved into faces that never blink. It's such a good visual metaphor for surveillance and silence. The director, Min Seong-gu, clearly had a field day making Larkhaveh feel like a place where even the architecture is in on the lie. But okay, let's circle back to Elena, because the drama never lets you forget the human cost under the chess moves. Episode 6 gives us one of the most heartbreaking Elena fragments. She hears music. Very faint, muffled through layers. At first, she thinks she's hallucinating, but then she realizes it's a violin, someone practicing in the gallery after hours. The note wavers, repeats, finds itself, and Elena starts tapping, weakly, against the inner shell in rhythm. Not to signal, not really, just to prove she's still aligned with something living. That scene wrecked me more than the overt horror, because it's so intimate. It's not fight back. It's stay a person. The show understands that survival is sometimes just refusing to let your inner world be colonized by pain. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but how does nobody notice anything for 3 months? And the drama actually answers that with chilling realism. The statue is displayed in a private wing-first restoration quarantine. They call it under the justification of humidity stabilization. Only select patrons can view it, and even then, there are barriers. The museum staff assigned to that wing are all new hires, brought in through a staffing agency owned by a shell company connected to the mayor's donors. And the one guard who seems a little too curious gets transferred after a single complaint about unprofessional behavior. It's not one big cover-up. It's 1,000 small controls, each one plausible, each one deniable. And when Helena finally gets closer to that museum wing, the show turns into a heist thriller for an episode. It's honestly fun in a grim way. Helena uses her social capital to get invited to a donor preview. She wears this black dress with a high collar, armor disguised as elegance. The camera lingers on the fabric, on the way it restricts her neck just slightly, like even her clothing is part of the suffocation motif. The score becomes minimal, just a pulsing SYNTH under the classical ambience, like a heartbeat under marble. She walks through the museum with Victor Kessler beside her, his hand hovering near her back like he owns her movement. Fake Ellen walks on Helena's other side, smiling for patrons, playing the dutiful daughter, and Helena is forced to perform normalcy while her eyes scan for exits, guards, cameras, vents. It's one of those sequences where you can feel the sweat under the character's skin, even though she looks dry as ice. And then, this is the moment the first half of the drama really pivots into obsession territory. Helena stands in front of the Revirw statue for the first time since the gala. The statue is luminous, creamy, flawless, soft curves catching the light like skin. The sculpting is so beautiful you almost hate yourself for thinking that. And Helena stares at it, And you see her trying to reconcile to realities, the art everyone is worshipping, and the daughter she knows is missing. The camera goes close on Helena's hand as she reaches out, not to touch, because there's a barrier, but to hover near the surface. Her fingers tremble, just slightly. And the sound design does that thing again. The room tone thins. People's voices blur. The only clear sound is Helena's breathing. Then, under all that, you hear it. A faint, uneven tapping. Not loud enough for anyone else to react. But Helena reacts like she's been struck. Her eyes widen, and for the first time in the drama, she looks like she might actually break in public. The shot holds on her face while everyone around her keeps smiling and chatting like nothing is happening. And that's where I'm going to stop for now, because the next sequence, what Helena does with that sound, how she decides whether to expose the horror immediately or play a longer game, kicks off a run of episodes that get even more ruthless with the psychological warfare, especially as Mara starts making choices that complicate everything Helena thought she knew about her enemy, and the mayor tightens the noose in ways that aren't just political but deeply personal, right down to the way he tries to rewrite Elena's identity in front of the whole city by forcing Helena to watch as he announces that Elena will be stepping into a new public role that Helena can't block without risking a scandal that would bury the truth even deeper. And the way the camera lingers on Helena's face in that moment tells you she's already decided she's going to commit a kind of violence of her own, not with knives or fists, but with a plan that starts with one simple, terrifying question. How do you rescue someone the world has agreed not to see when the only proof of their existence is a sound no one else is listening for? Helena doesn't answer it out loud, because she can't. Not with Victor Kessler's hand hovering at her back like a leash, not with Mara's smile angled toward the nearest camera, not with half the city's donors swirling around them smelling like cologne and expensive apathy. She answers it the way Helena Vale answers everything, by turning emotion into architecture. She leaves the museum with her face intact, her posture perfect, and the second the car door seals, she exhales like she's been holding her lungs hostage. Jain is already in the passenger seat, because of course he is. Helene doesn't do comfort, but she does contingency. She doesn't even greet him. She says, "There's tapping." And Jain doesn't ask if she's sure. He just nods once and says, "Then she's alive." That line, delivered completely flat, hit me harder than any swelling music cue could have, because it's the only kind of hope this drama allows. Not comfort, just confirmation. A fact. A single nail hammered into the lie. And then the next move is where you really see the show's brain. Helene can't smash the statue open in public. If she makes a scene in that wing, Victor's people spin it into Helena vandalize cultural treasure in mental break, and the statue gets quietly relocated to some private storage facility where Elena will die for real. So Helena does the thing that feels, on paper, colder than a mother should be allowed to do. She waits. She chooses strategy over immediacy. If you're yelling at your screen, you're not alone. I was pacing during that episode like I was personally employed by the Vale household. But the drama earns Helena's restraint by making the consequences brutally clear. Jain lays it out. They have one window, one chance to access the statue without alerting the conspiracy. And that means they need leverage first. So Helene begins building a trap using the city's favorite addiction, reputation. She leaks, through Neela, a whisper that Vale is considering pulling out of Larkhave entirely, moving her foundation, her investments, her museum endowments, all of it to a rival city. It's a lie, but it's a lie that creates motion. Donors panic. Council members start calling. Victor Kessler schedules emergency meetings. The show cuts between these frantic calls and Helena sitting alone in Elena's bedroom, listening to the silence like it's an enemy. The contrast is vicious. All that noise out there, and the one person who should be making noise is trapped in stone. Here's a little rehook, because this is where the drama stops being simply about finding Elena and starts being about whether Helena will survive becoming the kind of person who can. The question shifts from can she rescue her daughter to what will it cost her to get her back? And the cost starts showing up fast. Helena's staff quits in quiet waves, not because they don't care, but because they're terrified. The show doesn't villainize them. It shows you they're shaking hands as they pack boxes, the way they can't meet Helena's eyes, the way they say, "I'm sorry," like apology can protect them from power. Helena lets them go without a fight. And that's the first time you see her understand that her money can't shield other people from a system that's decided to punish anyone near her. Then the show does something I loved. Because it's such a grimly realistic escalation, it targets Helena's access. Her travel permits get randomly flagged. Her security detail gets audited. Her phones get tapped so badly you can practically hear the click. In one scene, Helena is talking to Jane on a secure line, and there's a faint echo of her own voice returning half a second late, like the city is mocking her with her own words. The sound team deserves a raise for that, because it's subtle enough to feel plausible, but airy enough to feel like haunting. And while all that is happening, Mara starts unraveling in a way that's both satisfying and weirdly tragic. The writers refuse to let her be a cardboard replacement, and instead they paint her as a woman who took a job thinking it was impersonation for hire and realized too late it was identity theft at the level of murder. Victor Kessler treats her like a tool he can polish or discard. Lucien Kale treats her like a nuisance, someone who wears the face but doesn't understand the art. Even Sarah Min, the PR director, speaks to Mara like she's a product. Chin down. Softer smile. Your eyes are too sharp today. There's a scene that sums up Mara's position perfectly. She's in a dressing room before a public appearance, and Sarah is adjusting her earrings like she's dressing a mannequin. Mara catches her own reflection and says quietly, "Do you ever wonder what it feels like to be her?" Sarah doesn't even look up. She says, "It doesn't matter. They only need to believe you are." And the camera stays on Mara's face as that lands. Not anger, something closer to nausea. If you want to know why this matters, keep watching the way Mara begins making tiny deviations. Not heroic ones. Not redemption arc ones. Just cracks. She lingers too long in Elena's old spaces. She starts reading Elena's notebooks. She begins asking questions that she shouldn't be curious about, like why Elena was auditing the Cultural Council, like why the statue's wing has restricted access, like why Victor flinches when Helena says the word Venus. And Victor notices, because predators always notice when their prey grows teeth. Now, the show's pacing in this stretch is really interesting, and I want to talk craft for a second without losing the story thread. The episodes start using these short, almost subliminal inserts, single-frame flashes of marble dust, a fingernail scraping stone, a close-up of Elena's eye in darkness right before key public scenes with fake Elena. It creates this uneasy sense that Elena's presence is bleeding into Mara's performance, like the real daughter is haunting her own life. It's not supernatural. It's editorial guilt. And it works. It keeps Elena present without forcing the plot to constantly revisit the statue interior, which would either numb you or break the tone. Instead, the show uses Elena like a pulse under the whole narrative. You don't see her every scene, but you feel her every scene. So Helena's plan. She needs access to that wing. The easiest way in is through Victor's own need to control. She arranges a private meeting with him at the Vale Foundation's office, a high-rise floor with floor-to-ceiling windows that make the city look like a miniature model she can crush. The set design there is gorgeous. Everything is white, silver, glass. No warmth. It's the kind of place where you could confess to murder and the room would still look clean. Victor arrives with that politician grin, and Helena greets him like an equal. They circle each other verbally, and this is where the writing gets deliciously venomous. Helena says she's willing to restore stability if Victor agrees to a few conditions. Victor, thinking he's winning, leans in. He says, "You mean you'll stop causing problems?" Helena replies, "I mean you'll stop manufacturing them." Then she offers him something, a public endorsement of his redevelopment initiative, the one that's been stalling because donors are nervous. In exchange, she wants a single thing, an after-hours, private inspection of the museum wing for security concerns. She frames it like philanthropy, like diligence, like she's protecting the city's cultural assets. Victor agrees, because he thinks he's just keeping her busy with a shiny object. And you can practically hear Giant's internal scream when he finds out. He tells her, "You're asking the fox for a tour of the henhouse." Helena answers, "I'm asking the fox to show me where he keeps the key." That's Helena in one line. Ruthless, elegant, terrifying. Here's another rehook, because this is where the show sets up one of its most nerve-wracking sequences. The statue inspection isn't just a visit. It becomes the closest thing to a rescue attempt we've seen, and it nearly detonates everything. The inspection night is filmed like a horror heist. Helena arrives in a tailored coat the color of dried blood, deep burgundy under museum lights. Giant is there as her legal counsel. Neela is not allowed in, but she's outside in a van with audio equipment because Neela Hart is the type of character who hears no as a dare. The museum is closed. The halls are dim. Motion sensors blink like sleepy eyes. Victor escorts them personally, which is itself a power move. He wants Helena to feel watched. Lucian Cale is there too, acting offended that anyone would question the safety of his masterpiece. He keeps calling it her, referring to the statue, not Elena, and every time he does, Helena's jaw tightens. The scene is so tense because the drama refuses to rush. It lets you hear their footsteps echo. It shows the camera angles from ceiling corners, like security footage. It lingers on the way Victor's men subtly reposition to block exits. And through all that, Helena keeps her face perfectly neutral, except for her eyes, which are locked on the statue like she's trying to see through stone. When they finally reach the wing, the statue is under a soft spotlight, alone behind a barrier. It looks sacred. It looks untouchable. And Elena, inside, hears them. The show gives us her perspective at the exact right moment. The muffled sounds of footsteps become clearer. Voices become vibrations. Elena presses her ear to the inner shell, and the audio becomes this distorted underwater world. She recognizes Helena's voice not by words, but by cadence, by the way Helena's breath catches between phrases. Elena's eyes fill with tears, but she doesn't sob, she can't waste air. Instead, she taps. 3 weak taps. A pause. 2 taps. The code Elena and Helena used when Elena was a child playing hide-and-seek in that enormous, ridiculous Valley estate. Helena hears it. Her hand twitches toward the barrier. And Lucian Cale says, smiling, you see, perfectly still. That's what makes it eternal. I swear, my skin crawled. Helena does something so controlled it feels like violence. She steps closer and says, very softly, Mr. Cale, do you know what happens to marble when it absorbs moisture for too long? Lucian looks irritated. It stains, he says. Helena nods. And what stains it? Lucian's smile falters. Helena continues. Breath. Blood. Tears. Victor interjects immediately, laughing too loud, telling her she's being dramatic. But Helena isn't performing for them. She's performing for Elena. She's telling her, I hear you. I know. Hold on. Giant. Meanwhile, does the legal maneuvering. He starts asking about the statue's internal support structure, citing earthquake regulations. He requests access to the maintenance hatch behind the display platform. Lucian refuses. Victor says it's unnecessary. Helena presses. And in that press, the scene becomes a chess match where every sentence is a threat wearing manners. The museum curator, Dr. Amara Voss, arrives mid-scene, and she's one of those characters who looks like she spent her life convincing herself she's neutral while standing in blood. She insists there is no maintenance hatch accessible to patrons. Giant counters with building codes. Dr. Voss goes cold and says, "This is a museum, Mr. Park, not a courtroom." And Jane replies, "It becomes a courtroom when someone dies here." That line hits, and the room shifts. The tragedy is, Helena is seconds away from forcing something open. You can see it in her posture, in the way her fingers flex, like she's imagining the feel of stone under her nails. But then Victor plays the card he's been holding. He steps closer, lowers his voice, and says, "If you touch it, I will have you arrested in front of her. And she will watch you fall. Again. Again." That word is not random. It implies history. It implies Helena has already lost something to this man, or to this city, before Elena. And the show doesn't explain it fully yet, but you see Helena flinch like she's been stabbed with a memory. This is one of those moments where the acting is doing narrative work that the script wisely holds back. Lee Herron lets Helena's composure crack just enough to show terror. Not for herself, but for what an arrest would do to Elena inside that statue. Imagine hearing your mother being handcuffed outside your prison and knowing you caused it by tapping. That's the kind of guilt the conspiracy would love to plant in Elena. Helena understands that instantly. So she backs down. And I hated it. I respected it. I hated it. That's the emotional whiplash this drama is built on. The right move feels like surrender, and the wrong move feels like love. Here's the kicker. Helena doesn't leave empty-handed. As she turns to go, she accidentally drops her clutch near the barrier. One of Victor's men moves to pick it up. But Helena says, "No, I've got it," and kneels. The camera goes low with her. Her hand touches the marble base for half a second, just long enough for her ring, which we've seen before as just an accessory, to scrape a tiny line in the dust buildup at the bottom edge. It's so subtle you might miss it. But later, in the car, Jane examines her ring and finds white residue embedded in the engraving, stone dust mixed with something darker. Blood. Not a lot. A trace. But enough to confirm Elena isn't just missing. She's right there. That moment is so quietly devastating that it almost feels obscene. Helena's staring at that dust on her own hand like it's sacred. Like it's proof and prayer at the same time. The music doesn't swell. It just gives you a low, trembling note, like the world itself is holding back tears. And then the show does something cruelly smart. It punishes Helena for getting too close. The very next day, a video leaks online of Helena in the museum wing, slowed down, zoomed in, edited to make her look like she's trying to vandalize the statue. Victor's office releases a statement about increased security due to threats against cultural property. The museum wing is placed on emergency lockdown. No patrons. No inspections. No access. Elena is moved. Not physically moved as in taken out, that would be too risky. But the statue is transferred from the museum to a private storage facility for preservation. A facility owned by a company Helena can't easily subpoena because it's offshore-led corporate sludge. The moment the transfer is announced, Helena's face goes blank in a way that genuinely scared me. It's the face of someone whose plan was outplayed. And that's when Helena stops playing defense. Another rehook for you. If you think Helena is about to become a straightforward avenging angel, the drama refuses that comfort. She becomes something more complicated. Because to fight a conspiracy that erases people, Helena starts erasing people back. Helena begins digging into Victor Kessler's personal vulnerabilities. And the show makes a point of showing how unpleasant that is even when you agree with her goal. She tasks Jane with tracing a decades-old land deal tied to Victor's first campaign. She sends her financial team after the mayor's donors. She uses her foundation's influence to threaten institutions. In one scene, she calls the chairman of the Cultural Council and says, calmly, "Resign by Friday, or I release the audit and the name of your mistress in the same email." It's brutal. It's effective. It's morally messy. And the drama doesn't let you cheer without thinking. It frames Helena alone after those calls, sitting in a dark office, rubbing her temples like she's scrubbing blood off her hands. Her assistant, Leora, asks quietly, "Is this who you want to be?" Helena doesn't answer. She just says, "This is who they made necessary." That line could sound like self-justification, and it is. But it's also an indictment of the world she lives in. The show is asking you, when the system is built for monsters, what does righteousness even look like? Now let's bring Neela back in, because Neela is the narrative oxygen. She starts publishing pieces that don't accuse directly, because she can't without evidence. But she begins highlighting patterns, missing funds, staffing agency connections, the sudden quarantine of the Venu statue, the mayor's donors who also sit on the cultural council. Her articles are careful, fact-heavy, and the show depicts the backlash with painful realism. Commenters call her a conspiracy theorist. Other journalists distance themselves. Her editor gets threatened with lawsuits. There's a scene when Neela sits in her tiny apartment, walls covered in pinned documents, and she receives a voicemail that's just breathing. No words, just someone listening to her listen. She throws her phone across the room, then immediately scrambles to pick it up because her whole life is in that device. It's a small moment, but it's so human. Fear makes you clumsy. Fear makes you ridiculous. The drama doesn't glamorize that. And Jain? He starts getting pulled back into his own past. We learn that his retirement wasn't voluntary. He was forced out after he prosecuted a human trafficking ring connected to the same network now protecting Victor. His old mentor, Judge Rainer Holt, had quietly sabotaged the case. And now Holt is one of the people signing off on warrants against Helena's allies. The show sets up the sense that the same hands have been shaping Larkhawe for years. Elena's entombment isn't an isolated atrocity. It's the logical endpoint of a city that's been burying people metaphorically forever. Now, I want to talk about Elena again, because the longer she's trapped, the more the show risks turning her into an object rather than a character. And it avoids that by giving her internal scenes a distinct language. Elena's sequences aren't just darkness and crying. They're memory, bargaining, hallucination, math. She counts time by the pattern of footsteps outside when the statue is in storage. She learns which hours the guards do rounds. She listens for the freight elevator. She tries to conserve moisture by breathing through fabric. It's grim survival logic. And then there's the mutilation aspect, which the show handles with restraint but doesn't sanitize. Elena has injuries that limit her movement and speech. The makeup team does understated work. A glimpse of bandaged stumps, bruising around wrists, the rawness of her lips. They never fetishize it. They present it as consequence, as theft. You're meant to grieve what was taken from her body as part of the identity theft. One of the most haunting Elena moments comes when the statue is relocated and the ambient sounds change. In the museum, she heard faint music and footsteps. In storage, she hears machinery, fans, drips, rats skittering, and she realizes she's been moved from art to inventory. The city's worship is gone. Now she's just a package. That shift breaks her in a new way. The camera stays tight on her eye, and you see panic bloom like ink. She taps desperately at the interior until her fingers bleed, and the sound becomes this dull, pathetic knocking that nobody answers. I'm telling you, the sound design is doing horror work without screaming at you. It keeps things muffled, internal, real. And this is where Mara's arc becomes crucial. Because while Helena is fighting the external system, Mara becomes a potential fracture inside it. Victor assigns Mara a new role. She's going to front a Vale renewal initiative, basically a public campaign to rebrand the Vale name under Victor's influence. It's a cage disguised as a crown. Mara is forced into more interviews, more appearances, more scripted speeches. She's under constant watch. But she also gains access. She gains the kind of access Elena would have had: files, schedules, security protocols. And the show uses that to build this delicious tension. Will Mara become a co-conspirator fully? Or will she betray them to save herself? Or Most interesting, will she betray them because she started to feel something like responsibility toward the person she replaced? There's a scene that I think is the turning point for Mara's internal conflict. She's in Victor's office late at night, and she sees a folder on his desk labeled Revirw's transfer. Victor steps away to take a call. Mara hesitates, then opens it. Inside are shipping manifests, storage facility codes, and a single photo of the statue wrapped in protective foam. Mara's hands shake. She closes the folder, but the camera catches her face. Horror, recognition, and a kind of furious disgust that she's been complicit in something so much worse than she allowed herself to admit. Victor returns and says, casually, "Don't touch my things." His tone is mild, but the threat is absolute. Mara says, "Where is she?" Victor smiles like she's told a joke. "You don't get to ask that," he says. Mara's voice breaks, just slightly. "You said she was gone." Victor's smile fades. "I said she was handled." Handled, like an asset. And in that moment, Mara finally understands the truth. She's not the replacement. She's just another disposable heir. If she steps out of line, she'll be handled too. That's the kind of villainy that makes your stomach cold. Because it's not emotional, it's procedural. Now, Helena's next big move in the plot is one of those sequences where you realize the writers have been setting up dominoes quietly for episodes. Remember that stone dust in Elena's bathroom drain? Remember the staffing agency tied to the museum wing? Remember Neela's receipts? Helena and Jain start connecting those dots into a name, Oren Halvet, a logistics magnate who owns the private storage facilities, the shipping company that moved the statue, and the staffing agency that provided the museum guards. He's not public-facing like Victor. He's the infrastructure guy, the one who makes bodies and objects move invisibly. And if Victor is the face of corruption, Oren is the bloodstream. Helena decides to go after Oren, not with money, but with fear. She arranges a meeting at an abandoned rail terminal. Yes, it's dramatic, but the show makes it make sense. Oren doesn't meet in offices. He meets in places that used to move things because he likes symbolism. The terminal is filmed in harsh sodium light, all rust and shadow, wind whistling through broken windows. Helena arrives with only one bodyguard, which tells Oren she's serious. Jain is watching from a distance with a camera, because again, document. Oren shows up in a heavy coat, hands in pockets, smiling like a man who's never had to say sorry. He calls Helene Mrs. Valley, like he's tasting the power in her name. He offers condolences for her family troubles. Helena doesn't bother with pleasantries. She says, "Where's the statue?" Oren laughs softly. "You'd be amazed what people pay to store art," he says. Helena's eyes don't move. "It's not art," she says. Oren's smile flickers, just a fraction. Because he knows she knows. And Helena says the line that made me sit up, "I can make you invisible." Not, "I can ruin you." Invisible. In a city where power is visibility, being made invisible is death. Oren's demeanor shifts. He tells her she's bluffing. Helena says, "You built your life moving things without being seen. I'll make sure you're never seen again." Then she slides a folder across a dusty bench. Inside are documents, offshore accounts, tax fraud trails, evidence of illegal shipments. Helena has been digging. She's been buying information the way she buys everything. Oren smiled eyes. This scene is a perfect example of the drama's tonal tightrope. You should be cheering because Helena is getting closer. But you also feel the chill of what she's become capable of. She's using the same shadow networks that hurt her. The show doesn't moralize. It just lets the discomfort sit. Oren doesn't give her the statue. Not directly. But he gives her something else. Confirmation that the statue is in a facility called Cold Water Vaults, and that a special item is scheduled for transfer again in 4 days. He says it like he's doing her a favor. Helena knows it's not a favor, it's a transaction. Oren is buying his own safety. And that sets up the next stretch of episodes where the narrative becomes this ticking clock. 4 days before the statue moves again, potentially out of the country, potentially somewhere unreachable. Helena has to act. Now, let me give you a personal confession moment that surprised me about my own viewing. I'm usually the person watching these revenge investigation plots going, okay, yes, burn them all, I'm on your side. But somewhere around here, watching Helena threaten Oren, I felt this weird grief, not just for Elena, but for Helena. Because you can see Helena disappearing into the mission. She's not eating. She's not sleeping. She stops wearing any color besides black and that deep burgundy. The costume design is basically charting her descent. Her jewelry gets sharper. Her hair gets tighter. It's like she's sculpting herself into something stone-like, mirroring the statue that holds her daughter. And I felt this ache, like, even if she wins, what's left of her softness? What's left of the mother who argued with Ellen about labor policies and still smiled? The show doesn't answer that yet, but it keeps asking it with visuals. Helena in glass reflections. Helena framed between marble columns. Helena lit like a statue herself. And if that's not enough, Victor escalates in the cruelest way. He tries to legally sever Helena's claim to Elena. He files for an emergency guardianship review, citing Helena's erratic behavior, and he uses fake Elena as the petitioner. Let that sink in. Mara stands in a courtroom, polished wood, flags, the judge elevated like God, and tells the world, my mother is unstable. She says she fears for her safety. She says Helena has threatened her. She asks the court to restrict Helena's access to Vale Foundation assets for her own good. It's one of those scenes where you want to throw something at the screen, but you also can't look away because it's so viciously well constructed. And the show shoots the courtroom like a theater of control. The camera stays behind Mara often, keeping her face partially hidden, emphasizing her role as an instrument. Helena sits at the defense table, jaw clenched, hands still. Jain argues that the petition is baseless. The judge, halt, of course, keeps interrupting, keeping the rhythm of balance, controlling the air in the room. The worst part? The public eats it up. Outside the courthouse, protesters gather, not for Elena, but for Elena, holding signs about protecting her from her mother. The show frames Helena walking through that crowd with the sound muffled, like she's underwater. People shout, but you can't hear words clearly. You just hear hostility as a roar. It's such a good depiction of how public narratives dehumanize. The crowd isn't evil, they're misinformed. Which is more depressing, honestly. Here's a rehook that matters. When the court hearing ends, Helena doesn't collapse. She smiles. And that smile is the most dangerous thing she's done so far. Because Helena realizes Victor has made a mistake. He's brought the fight into a space where records exist, where proceedings are documented, where Neela can get transcripts, where Jain can file motions. Victor is used to controlling the press, not the legal paper trail. He thinks he owns the judge, so he's safe. But paper has a way of surviving longer than people. Helena starts using the court process as a fishing line. She files discovery requests. She forces Mara's team to submit evidence. She makes Victor's office sign things. She creates a bureaucratic minefield where one wrong step can be proven. And the drama uses this to highlight a theme I didn't expect. Sometimes fighting power isn't about a gun or a punch. Sometimes it's about forms. It's about creating a record that can't be erased without someone's fingerprints showing. Now, because I'm staying moderate on spoilers, I'm not going to reveal exactly what evidence Helena pulls from the court process later, because that's one of the show's best oh my god payoffs. But I will say, it involves a medical record that shouldn't exist, a signature that isn't Elena's, and a single security camera timestamp that becomes the crack in the wall. Meanwhile, the cold water vault's plan begins taking shape. Helene can't just show up with a sledgehammer. Cold water is privately secured, staffed by ex-military contractors who don't answer to local police. Jain suggests going federal, but Helena knows federal agencies in Larkhave have been compromised. So they built their own operation, a combination of legal warrants, bribed access codes, and one very risky inside contact. That inside contact ends up being Mara. Yes, the imposter. And the way the drama gets there is so tense, because it doesn't make Mara suddenly noble. It makes her cornered. Helena arranges a private meeting with Mara at a charity event, one of those places where you can talk in plain sight because everyone assumes you're exchanging compliments. The scene is shot with shallow depth of field, making the crowd behind them blur into a soft, anonymous mass. It's a visual metaphor. The world is there, but it doesn't see. Helena approaches Mara with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes and says, "You're wearing my daughter's perfume." Mara's face tightens. She says, "It was in her room." Helena replies, "So is her skin." Mara flinches like she's been slapped. Then Helena leans closer, voice low enough that the microphones can't catch it, and says, "If you help me, you get to live." Mara's eyes widen. Helena continues, "If you don't, you will die when they're done using you. Because men like Victor don't keep evidence. They destroy it." Mara swallows hard. She tries to hold her composure, but you can see her hands trembling around her champagne glass. Mara whispers, "Where is she?" Helene says, "You tell me." Mara looks away, and for the first time, you see genuine fear on her face. Not fear of Helena, fear of what she's already been part of. That's the deal. Mara gives Helena access codes and transfer schedules in exchange for protection. Not forgiveness. Protection. The drama keeps the moral balance sharp. Helene isn't hugging her. She isn't saying it's okay. She's using her. And Mara, in turn, is using Helena to escape Victor. It's transactional, messy, believable. And the most twisted part is, this is the first time Helena and Mara have a conversation that feels real. Not mother and daughter. Two women in a cage, negotiating with teeth. If you think this alliance makes everything simpler, no. It makes everything more dangerous, because now Victor suspects betrayal. He starts watching Mara more closely, and Mara starts making mistakes under pressure. The show communicates that pressure through performance. Mara's smile gets tighter, her blink rate increases, she starts touching her own wrist unconsciously like she's checking for a pulse. The actress is doing such smart body work here. Now we hit one of the most suspenseful sequences in the middle stretch, the approach to cold water waltz. It's night. Rain. Again, rain is basically the drama's emotional solvent. Helena rides in a black SUV with Jain. Neela is in a second car with a hard drive and a live stream setup, because her plan is to broadcast evidence the moment they have it so it can't be buried. This is where the show leans into modern paranoia, the idea that truth has to be uploaded to exist. They arrive at cold water, which looks like a corporate bunker, a concrete rectangle surrounded by fences and floodlights, the kind of place where the air itself feels insured. The cinematography here shifts to colder tones, almost blue-gray, making skin look pale and tired. The sound is mostly low-frequency hum, generators, distant machinery. No birds, no life. They use Mara's code to get through the first gate. It works. And my heart sunk, because in thriller language, when the code works too easily, it means the trap is already set. Inside, Helena sees rows of crates, wrapped sculptures, boxed paintings, wealth stored like groceries. And somewhere among them is the Revirw statue containing Elena. The show doesn't let you see it immediately. It makes you wait, moving through aisles like a maze, the camera following behind Helena's shoulder so you feel her tunnel vision. Then they find it. The Revirw statue is wrapped in foam and plastic, strapped to a pallet like cargo. It looks obscene, beauty packaged. Helena steps toward it, and her hand hovers, shaking. She whispers, "Elena," not loudly, because she's afraid of being heard by anyone but her daughter. Inside, Elena hears her, and the show gives us this moment of pure, unbearable emotion. Elena tries to answer, but her voice is gone. So she taps. Weak. Desperate. 3 taps. 2 taps. Helena's face crumples, just slightly, and she presses her forehead against the plastic wrap like she's trying to transfer warmth through layers. I'm not ashamed to admit I teared up there. It wasn't even the horror anymore. It was the fact that after months of being erased, Elena is acknowledged again. That tiny exchange, tap, response, felt like a resurrection. And right when you let yourself breathe, the floodlights snap brighter. Alarms don't blare. Cold water is too professional for loud panic. Instead, the doors lock with a heavy mechanical clunk, and a calm voice comes over the intercom. Mrs. Vale, please step away from company property. Victor's voice. Of course he's there. Not physically, but present. Watching through cameras. Because the entire place is a stage too. He tells her, politely, that she's trespassing. He says he's disappointed she forced his hand. He offers her a deal. Leave now, stop the audit, accept Elena's public role. And he'll make sure Helene never sees a prison cell. Helena doesn't respond. She's staring at the statue. Then Victor says the line that turns the screw. If you stay, your daughter dies. And that's where the episode cuts in a way that made me actually shout, which I rarely do anymore. Because it's not just a cliffhanger. It's the show pinning Helena's love against her strategy. It's asking, will she sacrifice the bigger war for the immediate rescue? Or will she risk Elena's life to win a fight that could save countless others? The next episode answers that question with a choice that is both brave and horrifying. And I'm going to keep my moderate spoiler promise by not spelling out exactly how the cold water standoff resolves, but I will tell you the show doesn't take the clean option. It takes the option that leaves scars. And the scars don't just belong to Elena. Helena leaves cold water with proof. Not the kind you want, not the kind that feels like victory, but enough to shake the conspiracy's surface. Neela gets footage. Jain gets a document. Helena gets a fragment, an actual physical fragment, that becomes the most emotionally loaded object in the entire drama. A small piece of marble chipped from the statue's base with Elena's dried blood on it. Helena carries it like a relic. She holds it when she can't sleep. She presses it into her palm until her skin dents. And that's when you realize the show's title isn't just shock. It's literal, yes, but it's also about how trauma becomes an object you carry. How a person becomes a thing in the eyes of power, and how love refuses that. Now, because we're still in the first half of this review script, and there's so much more plot to unpack, I want to pause on something that the drama does exceptionally well. It makes the conspiracy feel not omnipotent, but adaptive. Every time Helena finds a seam, the enemy doesn't just punch back. They pivot. They rewrite the rules. That's why it stays tense. It's not villain of the week. It's a living system. Victor responds to the cold water breach by tightening control over Mara and accelerating the public rollout of Elena's new role. He schedules a televised interview where Mara will sit with a beloved talk show host and discuss finding her voice and redefining family boundaries. In other words, a public ritual of severance. The intent is to make Helena's claim to Elena socially unacceptable. If the world accepts that Elena has chosen distance from her mother, then Helena's future accusations look like harassment, not rescue. And the show stages that interview like a sacrificial ceremony. Warm lighting, soft music, audience applause. Mara in a pastel dress that looks like Innocent's cosplay. The host asks gentle questions, guiding her toward lines like, "My mother and I have different visions." Mara delivers them, voice steady, but her eyes keep flicking off camera, toward where Victor's people are standing. She's not speaking freely. She's reading survival. At home, Helene watches the broadcast in a dark room. The only light is the TV glow, painting her face in flickering blues. And Lee Harron does this thing where she doesn't cry. She doesn't even blink much. She just watches. And you see her absorbing every word like it's a weapon being pressed into her ribs. Jain sits behind her, powerless for once. And you can tell he wants to say something comforting, but knows comfort is insulting right now. Then Mara says, on live television, I love my mother. But I need to be safe. Safe. Helena's lips part like she's been punched. Because Elena used to say that word too in a completely different context. Safe workplaces, safe shelters, safe communities. Now it's being used to cage her. And this is where the drama lands one of its most painful ironies. The imposter's lines are not entirely lies. Mara is not safe. Elena is not safe. Helene is not safe. The word becomes a propaganda tool, stripped of meaning. A quick self-aware aside before we drown. This is the part where, if I were Helena, I would have thrown the entire television through the window. I'm not saying that's the right move. I'm just saying my emotional regulation is not Wale grade. But Helena doesn't throw anything. She stands up, walks to her desk, and starts writing names on a sheet of paper. Not metaphorically. Literally. Names of everyone in the room with Victor. Names of donors. Names of judges. Names of museum staff. It's like she's building a kill list, except her weapon is exposure. The camera looks down at the paper, the pen scratching loud in the mix. And you understand, Helena is going to dismantle the social architecture that allowed Elena to be hidden. That dismantling is where the show's most satisfying character moments start to bloom, because Helena begins forcing people to choose sides, and some of them surprise you. Not everyone is evil. Not everyone is brave. Most people are tired, self-protective. But the drama gives us a few key figures who crack. Dr. Amara Was, the museum curator, is one of them. She's been complicit, yes, but she's also visibly haunted. There's a scene where she stands alone in the now-empty Venu's wing, staring at the spotlight on the floor where the statue used to stand. The space looks like a missing tooth. She touches the barrier rail with trembling fingers, like she can still feel the vibrations of Elena's tapping. The score is a thin, high violin note that makes the air feel fragile. And you can see Doctor was realizing that she didn't just help a crime. She participated in a living burial. Later, Helena corners her at a fundraising luncheon. Not with threats, with empathy, weaponized empathy. But still, Helena says, you've built your life protecting objects. When did you stop protecting people? Dr. Voss's eyes fill. She whispers, they told me she was already dead. Helena replies, and you accepted that because it made your conscience easier to curate. It's brutal. It's also true. And Dr. Voss, shaken, gives Helena a key piece of information. Lucien Kell's studio has a private sub-basement, not on any public blueprint, designed for experimental casting. A place where sound doesn't travel. A place where Eleanor was sealed. This is where the narrative starts pulling toward Lucien as more than an accessory villain. He becomes a symbol of aestheticized violence. He's the type of person who can do monstrous things and still call himself a creator. And Lucien's scenes are shot with this sickly beauty that makes you feel complicit as a viewer. His studio is all white walls, skylight glow, floating dust. The camera moves slowly, reverently, like it's filming a cathedral. The music is choral, almost sacred. And then Lucien says something wild, like, pain is a tool to purify the form, and the sacred framing becomes an accusation. The show is asking you, how many times have we admired beauty without asking what it cost? Another rehook, because the next stretch contains the most unexpectedly tense character confrontation in the entire drama. Helena and Lucien, alone, in his studio, surrounded by statues that suddenly feel like graves. Helena goes to Lucien under the guise of commissioning a new piece for the Vale Foundation. She plays the patron. She praises his work. She smiles. And Lucien, arrogant as ever, welcomes her like a queen visiting a priest. He offers her tea. He talks about Venus like she's a goddess resurrected. He never says Elena's name. The studio is quiet except for the faint scrape of tools and the whisper of dust settling. Helena walks among unfinished statues, torsos without heads, hands without arms, and the camera keeps catching her between them, as if she's being dismembered by the frame. It's an incredible visual choice because Helena is there to reclaim her daughter's identity, and the world around her is literally carved into fragments. Lucien says, "You're drawing to permanence, Mrs. Vale. That's why you build foundations." Helena replies, "I build because things collapse." Lucien smiles. "People collapse," he corrects. "Art remains." Helena turns to him and says, "My daughter remains." And for the first time, Lucien's calm facade slips. Just a fraction. Enough to confirm guilt. Helena steps closer, voice soft, and says, "Did she scream?" Lucien's eyes flick away. He says, offended, "I don't understand your vulgarity." Helena doesn't blink. "Did she beg?" Lucien's jaw tightens. "You're confused," he says. Helena leans in, and the camera goes so close you can see the fine lines at the corner of her eyes. She whispers, "I heard her tapping." Lucien freezes. That freeze is the entire point of the scene. He didn't expect Eleanor to be alive. Or rather, he didn't expect Helena to have proof of life. The conspiracy's greatest protection is uncertainty. Helena's certainty is a blade. Lucien recovers quickly and says, "Coolly, you're imagining things." Helena smiles. "So are you," she says, and then she does something wild. She pulls the marble fragment from her pocket and places it on Lucien's pristine white table. A speck of blood on creamstone. An obscene stain in his perfect world. Lucien's eyes lock on it like it's poison. Helena says, "Tell me where she is, or I make sure everyone knows what you used to create a masterpiece." Lucien laughs. Sharp, dismissive. "People don't care," he says. "They care about the story they're given." Helena replies, "Then I'll give them a better one. I'll give them yours." And the scene ends not with a confession, but with Lucien leaning back and saying, almost gently, "You'll ruin yourself." Helena answers, "Good." That "good" made my throat tighten, because it's not a triumph line. It's a surrender line. Helena is accepting that to save Eleanor, she might have to destroy Helena. And that's where I'm going to leave you hanging again, because the aftermath of that studio confrontation is where the drama starts, stacking consequences in a way that spirals outward. Victor retaliates by turning Helena's own board against her. Mara's cooperation becomes a liability that could get her killed. And Eleanor's condition inside the statue deteriorates in a way the show depicts with such brutal intimacy that you feel time like a physical pressure, especially when the next major set piece forces Helena to choose between exposing Lucien publicly in a way that could locate the statue faster, or keeping the secret long enough to execute a quieter extraction that risks losing Eleanor if the transfer happens sooner than the schedule Mara provided. And the tension in that choice is where this drama really starts to earn its reputation as more than a shock title thriller, because it becomes a story about what truth costs when the people who own the microphones also own the knives, and that's exactly when the drama stops letting you sit comfortably in the fantasy of just expose them. Because once Helena starts talking about truth like it's a weapon, the show asks the ugly follow-up. What if truth is also collateral damage? The very next episode opens with a montage that's basically Helena's world being quietly repossessed. Not by men with guns, by men with clipboards, bank compliance officers, board representatives, lawyers in neutral suits, the kind of people who can dismantle a life in conference rooms with bottled water. Helene walks through the Vale Foundation lobby and the camera catches little changes. Her nameplate removed from a door, a security badge scanner swapped out, staff looking down when she passes. The score is this thin, steady pulse like tinnitus, and it makes the whole montage feel like disassociation. Trauma as paperwork. And it's Victor Kessler's genius cruelty. He doesn't attack Helena where she's loud. He attacks her where she's logistical. He moves to freeze her operational control of the foundation under the guise of protecting donors from instability. It's the same smear strategy, but now it has teeth. So Helene is boxed into a dilemma that's painfully real. If she goes public accusing the mayor and a celebrity sculptor of sealing her daughter alive in a statue, she risks being painted as delusional and getting her remaining access stripped completely. But if she stays quiet, Eleanor stays buried, and the statue can be moved beyond reach. It's a vice. Here's the tension pivot that kept me glued. The drama doesn't position this as choose love or justice. It positions it as choose which kind of violence you can live with. Jain argues for the quiet extraction. He's pragmatic. He's seen cases die because someone wanted a press moment too early. Neela argues for controlled exposure. Release evidence in waves to force institutions to react before Victor can suppress it. Helena, for once, is the most emotional and the most strategic at the same time. She says, if I whisper, they will bury her deeper. If I scream, they will call it noise. Then she looks at the marble fragment in her palm and adds, so I'm going to make them listen. This is where the show starts using media as a battlefield in a way that feels very 2026, very now, and honestly a little too plausible for comfort. Neela doesn't just write an article. She builds a time drop. Files scheduled to publish across multiple platforms simultaneously, mirrored through international servers, attached to a live stream with a countdown. The drama shows her setting it up with the kind of careful hands you'd expect in a bomb scene. And in a way, it is a bomb. A truth bomb, sure, but still an explosive device in a city built on silence. And while Neela is doing that, Helena is doing something colder. She's preparing a sacrificial offering. Let's talk about Helena's board coup for a second, because this is where the writing gets deliciously nasty. The Vale Biotech board, led by a man named Conrad Whale, Helena's longtime business partner, who has always smiled a little too widely, calls an emergency meeting. Conrad frames it as concern. Helene, we are worried about you. He suggests appointing an interim director for stability. The camera frames Conrad with the city skyline behind him like he's already sitting in her chair. Helena sits at the far end of the table, alone, and you can see she's aware of every betrayal in the room. One by one, board members speak, using phrases that have clearly been handed to them by Victor's PR machine: public trust, brand risk, emotional volatility. It's gaslighting with a PowerPoint. Helena doesn't interrupt. She lets them talk. And when they finish, she looks at Conrad and says, "You've practiced this speech." Conrad smiles like he's hurt. "We care," he says. Helene nods once, then slides a single document across the table. "Then you'll care about this," she replies. It's a forensic audit of Conrad's offshore holdings, showing he's been siphoning money through shell companies tied to the same cultural council accounts Elena was investigating. Conrad's face changes. Not outrage, fear. Because Helene isn't guessing. She's proving. And here's the part that made me lean back and just whisper, wow. Helena doesn't use it to save a seat. She uses it to force his hand. She tells him, calmly, that if he votes against her today, she releases the audit to federal investigators and to Neela. Conrad stares at her, stunned. He says, "You'd burn the company." Helena answers, "I'll burn the city if that's what it takes to find my child." That's the moment you realize Helena has crossed an internal line. She's no longer protecting the Vale legacy as a separate entity from Elena. The legacy is now just fuel. And again, it's thrilling, it's terrifying, it's messy. Quick rehook before we slide into the next major sequence. The show makes you think the board meeting is the main fight, and then it drops the real punch. Victor doesn't need Helena's company. He needs Helena's motherhood. He escalates by trying to legally redefine Elena's identity in a way that makes rescue look like kidnapping. Victor's office files documents to have Elena recognized as the sole acting director of the Vale Charitable Trust, citing Elena's mature independence and Helena's recent instability. It's bureaucratic identity theft. If that goes through, Mara gains real legal authority over Vale assets, which Victor can steer. Helena becomes, on paper, a liability. And if Helena later abducts Eleanor, she becomes the villain in the public record. This is where Mara's character becomes so crucial, because Mara realizes the plan will trap her permanently. Victor isn't going to let her walk away with a new life. He's going to lock her into Eleanor's identity until it's convenient to bury her too. And that's when Mara starts making bolder moves, still not heroic, but desperate. One of the best Mara scenes happens in a restroom at a gala, of all places. She's standing at the mirror, hands braced on the counter, staring at her own face like it's a mask fused to bone. She turns on the faucet, splashes water, and for a second, you see a flicker of the real her, panic, disgust, grief. Then Sarah Min enters behind her, smiling, and says, "They loved you tonight." Mara doesn't look at Sarah. She says, very quietly, "I'm not her." Sarah's smile doesn't change. "You are what they need," she replies. Mara finally turns, eyes sharp, and says, "And what do you need?" Sarah pauses, just a beat too long. It's the first time you see Sarah as more than a sleek villain. There's fear behind her eyes too. She answers, "To survive." That's the show telling you something important. Everyone in Victor's orbit is trapped in some way. Not equally, not morally equivalent, but trapped. The conspiracy is a machine that eats its own parts. And then, in a move that made me gasp because it's so audacious, Mara slips a tiny folded note into Helena's coat pocket as they pass each other outside the restroom. No eye contact. No dramatic music. Just a brief brush of fabric like an accident. Later, Helena opens it in her car. It contains a single line. "Transfer moved UP. 48 hours. That's it. 2 days." The clock just got crushed. This is where the plot starts sprinting, but the show keeps its emotional clarity. Helena isn't just racing against time. She's racing against her own instincts. Every maternal impulse screams, "Go now, break it open." But she knows any visible move will trigger Victor's countermeasures. So Helena does something that, in any other drama, would feel like a villain monologue plan. Here, it feels like a mother turning into a general. She calls in an old favor from someone even Victor can't easily intimidate. Archbishop Caldesrain, a religious figure with deep influence over the city's older power structures. Now, I know, an archbishop in a conspiracy thriller can sound like a soap twist. But the drama grounds it in Larkhavis culture. The church here isn't just spiritual, it's social capital. It's donor networks and legacy families and moral legitimacy. Helena meets the archbishop in a candlelit chapel, and the scene is filmed with this warm, golden light that almost feels like mercy, except it's mercy used as bargaining. The archbishop listens, face solemn, and asks Helena what she wants. Helena answers, "A door opened." He says, "At what cost?" Helena looks at the candles and says, "I've already paid." He agrees to help on one condition. He wants Helena to fund a new sanctuary initiative for victims of exploitation. Helena laughs once, bitterly. "You mean you want a statue?" she says. The archbishop's eyes sharpen. "I want protection," he replies. Helena nods. "Then open the door," she says. You can feel the moral grime on that deal. It's not pure. It's not noble. It's real. Another rehook, because the next set piece is the kind of sequence this drama was built for, a rescue attempt staged inside a transfer operation where the statue is treated like cargo and Elena is treated like a secret that can't be allowed to breathe. The transfer night is filmed with a brutal industrial aesthetic. Forklifts, floodlights, rain hammering metal, workers in reflective vests moving like ants. The soundtrack is mostly machinery and distant thunder, with the score barely present. Just a low drone that makes your stomach feel slightly sick. Cold Water Waltz is alive with motion, which is the last thing Elena can afford. Helena and Jine approach not as intruders this time, but as authority. The Archbishop's influence gets them a temporary inspection order under the guise of cultural protection and ethical oversight, which sounds ridiculous until you remember how often institutions use ethics language as performance. Victor's people can't block it without seeming guilty. That's the crack. They enter with a small team: Jane, Helene, a medical professional Helen trusts named Dr. Sloan Kirov, quiet, competent, morally exhausted, and a security men who look like they've seen too much. Neela is outside, coordinating the scheduled evidence drop, finger hovering over publish. Inside, they locate the statue on a loading bay. It's wrapped again, strapped down, about to be loaded into a truck. Helena's breath catches, and for a second, she looks like she might faint. Lee Harron plays that moment so beautifully. Helena's strength doesn't vanish. It wavers like a tower in wind. Jane moves fast, flashing paperwork at the site manager. The manager protests, says they're on a schedule, says this is private property. Helena steps forward and says, "So is my daughter." They cut the straps. They peel back the plastic. The statue's surface catches the floodlight and looks almost alive. Dr. Sloan approaches the base, searching for seams, listening. She presses a stethoscope to marble, and the sound design does something incredible. You hear, faintly, the internal echo of Elena's breathing. It's not loud. It's like listening through a wall at a dying house. Dr. Sloan looks at Helena and says, "She's alive." Barely. And then all hell begins, not with gunfire, but with a simple, devastating announcement over a radio: Mayor's unit incoming. Victor has arrived with legal authority and tactical force, framed as preventing vandalism and theft of city property. He's turned the rescue into a public order issue. The drama is so smart here. Victor doesn't have to be right, he just has to be official. He doesn't have to be moral, he just has to be plausible. Helena realizes they have minutes, maybe less. She looks at Dr. Sloan and says, "Open it." Dr. Sloan hesitates. "If we break it wrong, we kill her," she says. Helena's eyes fill, but her voice is steady. "If we don't break it, she dies anyway." That exchange is the core of this drama. Love as impossible physics. Now, I'm going to respect the moderate spoiler line again. I'm not going to describe the full extraction mechanics or the immediate outcome of this transfer confrontation, because that's a late-game sequence with consequences that ripple hard. But I can talk about how the show shoots the moment of opening, because it's one of the most visceral pieces of filmmaking in the series. They don't smash the statue like an action movie. They treat it like a surgical procedure. Dr. Sloan uses a precision cutter on a seam near the base. The sound is unbearable, a high whine against stone, like dental horror turned up to mythic scale. The camera stays tight on Helena's face as she listens, because Helene can't look. She can only hear. The edit cuts to Elena inside, her eye widening as light knives through a new crack, dust raining down like ash, air rushing in like a blessing and an assault at once. The score finally enters, but it's not triumphant. It's a trembling, dissonant chord that feels like the world tearing. And in the middle of that, Victor's men are getting closer. You hear boots on metal stairs. Shouted orders. The sound mix becomes a layered panic. Machinery, footsteps, cutting tool, Elena's ragged breath. It's sensory overload. And the show wants that, because that's what this moment is: salvation and catastrophe colliding. When the opening widens enough for a hand, Helena reaches in. And that's the moment that broke me more than anything else. Because Helena's hand disappears into the statue, into darkness, into dust, and Elena's fingers, weak, trembling, curl around her mother's wrist like she's anchoring herself to reality. It's not a hug. It's not even a grip. It's a desperate confirmation. You're real. I'm real. We exist. Helena whispers, "I'm here." And Elena, who cannot speak, taps once against Helena's skin. One tap. Yes. If you're not emotionally invested by then, you're made of marble yourself. Now, this is where the contrarian take I mentioned earlier deepens. The obvious reading is that the rescue attempt is the moral climax. Helena's love triumphs. End of story. But the drama refuses to let rescue be the end. It treats rescue as the beginning of a new war. The war over who gets to define what happened. Because even if Helena gets Elena physically out, Victor still controls the city's narrative infrastructure. He can call Elena's emergence a hoax. He can call it staged. He can say Helena harmed her daughter to frame the mayor. He can do what powerful systems always do, muddy truth until it becomes opinion. And the show knows that, so it pivots into what I think is its most interesting thematic territory: identity restoration. Not getting her back like she's an object. Restoring her name in a world that's already accepted the fake. This is where the writing gets painfully intimate, because we start seeing Elena not as a mystery in a statue, but as a traumatized person in a body that's been altered and a life that's been stolen. The drama doesn't magically heal her. It doesn't do the she wakes up and immediately points at the villain trope. Elena is weak, disoriented, and, crucially, furious in a quiet way. There is a scene after the extraction, again, keeping the exact setting and immediate aftermath vague for spoiler moderation, where Elena is in a dim room, wrapped in a blanket, air finally on her skin. She looks down at her hands and doesn't cry. She just stares, and the camera holds long enough that you start to feel uncomfortable, like you're intruding on a sacred wound. Helena sits beside her, trying to touch her, afraid to touch her. She finally says, "I'm sorry." Elena turns her head slowly and looks at Helena with eyes that feel older. And when she tries to speak, her voice comes out as a rasp, thin, broken. And she says, "You believed her." Helena flinches, because Elena isn't talking about the imposter in the simple sense. She's talking about the months Helena lived with Mara in her house. The dinners, the events, the smiles. Elena is asking a question that cuts deeper than the conspiracy. Did my mother know me well enough to notice? And Helena, who can intimidate a boardroom into silence, can't answer her daughter without falling apart. That's the emotional territory the show is brave enough to enter. It understands that trauma doesn't just create villains. It creates fractures inside love. Here's a rehook, because the next dynamic is the one that makes this drama more than a revenge thriller. The triangle of Helena, Elena, and Mara becomes a psychological minefield, and the show plays it with surprising restraint. Mara doesn't vanish once Elena returns. Victor can't simply dispose of her immediately without risking loose ends. Helena can't simply forgive her without betraying Elena's pain. And Elena, who should have all the sympathy in the world from viewers, is not portrayed as saintly. She's allowed to hate. She's allowed to want blood. And that honesty is what makes her feel real. There's a scene where Helena confronts Mara in a safe house, and Elena is in the next room. Helena tells Mara she will protect her if she testifies. Mara looks hollow, exhausted. She says, "I didn't know." Elena, hearing this, steps into the doorway like a ghost and whispers, "You wore my face." Mara's eyes fill. She tries to speak, but nothing comes out. Elena walks closer, slow, trembling with rage and weakness. She says, "Did you sleep in my bed?" Mara flinches. She whispers, "I had to." Elena's breathing becomes shallow. Helena steps between them, not to protect Mara, but to keep Elena from collapsing. And Elena says something that made me physically shiver. "If I kill her, will I feel like myself again?" Helena's face crumples, because she knows the answer is no, and also because she can't bear that her daughter is even asking. That scene is shot with almost no music, just air conditioner hum, the faint creak of floorboards. The absence of score makes it feel unbearably real, like you're overhearing something you shouldn't. The director trusts the actors completely here, and it pays off. Now, the show doesn't let Mara off easy. She's not framed as a victim on equal footing. But it does something more unsettling. It frames her as a mirror. Elena's life was stolen. Mara's identity was never stable to begin with. Mara is a woman who agreed to become someone else for money, and now she's trapped in that skin, hunted by the people who hired her and hated by the people she wronged. Her punishment isn't jail, it's being seen as a ghost. And Sarah Min, the PR director, becomes the one who keeps tightening that ghosthood. Sarah begins spinning a counter-narrative in the media. She claims the real Elena is an imposter hired by Helena to discredit the mayor. She claims Helena staged a body double to manipulate public sentiment. It's sick. It's effective. Because in a world where deepfakes exist and trust is eroded, plausibility is currency. The drama is very pointed about this. It shows news anchors using phrases like alleged, unverified, conflicting accounts, while showing Elena's trembling hands in a dim room. The split between lived truth and public truth is the show's deepest horror. If you came for the statue premise, this is where you realize the statue was only the first prison. The second prison is language. Jain, bless him, goes on offense legally. He files an emergency injunction to stop Victor's office from seizing Wale assets. He pushes for federal oversight. He tries to force a medical examination record into public record to validate Elena's identity. And this is where the drama becomes, unexpectedly, a courtroom thriller with teeth. Judge Holt, the same man who tried to strip Helena's control earlier, schedules a hearing. The courthouse scenes in this drama are shot like mausoleums, high ceilings, cold light, stone everywhere. Again with the stone. The city can't stop making itself into a statue. At the hearing, Elena is brought in, weak, covered, hidden from cameras. Helena tries to shield her body with her own. Victor's attorneys argue that exposing Elena is harmful to her mental state. They claim Helena is exploiting her trauma. And it's the kind of argument that makes your blood boil because it's not entirely wrong in abstract. Media exposure can harm a victim. But here it's being used to erase her. Elena looks at the judge and tries to speak. Her voice cracks. She says her name, Elena Vale. The judge asks for proof. Elena lifts her hand and shows a small scar on her palm. Something established earlier in the series as a childhood injury from climbing the Vale estate's iron gate. Helena had mentioned it once at dinner with fake Elena, and fake Elena didn't know. Elena says, "My mother scolded me for bleeding on her white roses." It's a tiny memory, but it's intimate. It's unfakeable. And for a second, you think it's enough. You think human reality might pierce the system. Then Victor's attorney says, smoothly, anyone can learn a story. That line is like a slap. Because it's true in the world Victor has built. Truth is always deniable if you're willing to poison everything. Now, I'm going to be fair and mention one critique I had here, even though I loved the drama overall. There are moments in these legal episodes where the dialogue gets a little too written, a little too rhetorical. Not often, and the performances carry it, but you can feel the writers sometimes wanting to land a thesis line. The show is at its best when it trusts silence and specificity. When it reaches for speeches, it occasionally thins the realism. That said, the emotional core stays strong because Elena's presence changes everything. The actress playing Elena, still SEOGN, but now as the real Elena in trauma mode, shifts her performance completely. Her warmth becomes something harder. Her eyes are still kind, but they're guarded. She moves like her body is unfamiliar. She flinches at sudden sound. And yet there is steel in her that wasn't visible before, like suffering has concentrated her into a sharper form. And the drama is careful not to fetishize that stronger after trauma trope. Elena isn't stronger because she suffered. She's stronger because she refuses to let suffering be the final author of her identity. That's an important difference. Here's the next rehook, because this is where the show delivers one of its most chilling reversals. Helene finally gets a chance to crush Victor publicly, and she doesn't take it the way you expect. Neela's time drop is ready. She has footage from cold water. She has manifests. She has financial trails. She even has a short audio clip, muffled, but unmistakably Eleanor's tapping captured through a stethoscope mic. It's not proof in a courtroom sense yet, but it's emotionally undeniable. The internet would explode. Helene tells Neela to wait. And I was like, Helene, what are you doing? But her reasoning is horrifyingly sound. If they release everything now, Victor can claim it's manipulated, can flood the media with counter-narratives, can weaponize confusion. He can also retaliate against Eleanor directly because Eleanor is still medically fragile and physically at risk. Helene wants one more thing before she detonates the story. A confession from someone inside the conspiracy, on record with legal weight. And the only person positioned to give that confession is Mara. So Helena, in a move that is both brilliant and morally radioactive, offers Mara a deal. Testify publicly against Victor and Lucien. And Helena will shield her from prosecution as much as possible, using her resources to negotiate protective custody. If Mara refuses, Helena will release everything anyway, and Mara will be torn apart. By Victor, by the public, by Eleanor, by the legal system. Mara is cornered. Again. But here's the twist that made me respect the writing. Mara doesn't immediately agree. She says, if I testify, she'll never forgive you. Meaning Eleanor. Meaning, Eleanor will see Helena protecting her impersonator, and it will fracture their relationship further. Mara is acknowledging that her role in this isn't just legal. It's emotional poison. Helena looks at Mara and says, quietly, my daughter is already broken. I will not break her further to soothe my pride. That line is such a window into Helena's growth. Early Helene would have cared about being seen as righteous. Now she cares about outcomes. About Eleanor's survival, not Helena's moral image. And that's where the show quietly does something powerful. It shows love as pragmatism. Not romantic pragmatism. Maternal pragmatism. The kind of love that will be hated if it means the child lives. Mara agrees to testify. But she doesn't do it for Helena. She does it because Victor will kill her otherwise. And because she's reached the point where carrying Eleanor's face feels like a curse she wants to break, even if breaking it destroys her. Now, the confession setup is staged like a trap. Because of course Victor won't let Mara just walk into a courtroom and speak. They have to protect her long enough to get her words on record. Jain arranges a deposition in a secure location, an old federal office that's been mothballed, one of the few places not fully compromised. The show shoots it like a bunker. Harsh fluorescent lights, peeling paint, the sound of distant pipes. It's ugly, which is perfect. Truth isn't pretty here. Mara sits at a table, hands shaking, and begins speaking into a recorder. She names Victor. She names Lucien. She names Oren Halvet. She describes the recruitment, how she was approached by Sarah Min with a contract, how she was told Eleanor would be taken care of, how she was coached in Eleanor's mannerisms, how she was installed into the valet estate within days. She describes being warned never to approach the statue wing, never to ask questions, never to go near Lucien's studio. And as she speaks, the drama crosscuts to Victor watching from somewhere else, receiving word that Mara is missing. His face stays calm, but his eyes go flat. He makes a phone call. The person on the other end says, "We'll retrieve her." Victor replies, "Not retrieve. Remove." That word lands like a guillotine. Here's the rehook that matters most. The deposition becomes a race against assassination, and the show shoots it with a suffocating inevitability that made me genuinely anxious. You can see Victor's men closing in. The camera shows black SUVs moving through rain. Windshield vipers like metronomes. Radios crackling. Meanwhile, inside the deposition room, Mara is talking faster, voice trembling, trying to get the truth out before the door breaks. Helena is in the room, but not sitting beside Mara. She's standing against the wall like a guard and a judge at once. Eleanor is not there. Helena refuses to expose her to this. Neela is in a separate room, ready to upload the deposition audio the moment it's complete. Jain keeps prompting Mara to clarify dates, to name people fully, to describe physical occasions. It's procedural, but the urgency makes it feel like they're building a lifeboat plank by plank while the ship tilts. And then the lights flicker. I'm not even joking. The way this drama uses simple infrastructure cues, flickering lights, slowing air vents, sudden silence, makes you feel hunted. The audio drops out for half a second, then returns with a slight echo, suggesting someone is interfering with the building's power. Mara looks up, eyes wide. Jain says, "Keep talking." Mara's voice cracks as she says, "Eleanor was sealed alive." She pauses, swallowing, then adds, "She was breathing when they closed it." Helena's eyes fill, but she doesn't move. She just listens like she's carving the words into stone. And then there's a knock at the door. Not a polite knock. A heavy, measured thud. Like someone testing the frame. Jain looks at Helena. Helena nods once. Neela, in the other room, starts uploading the audio, even though it's incomplete. Because partial truth is better than dead truth. I won't spoil the exact outcome of this deposition siege sequence, because it's one of the most intense later episodes, and it hinges on who gets out and what gets preserved. But I can talk about what the show does emotionally. It forces you to confront that truth-telling is dangerous in a literal way. It's not just people will judge you. It's people will kill you. And that's where the drama's title blooms into something bigger. The statue isn't just Eleanor's prison. It's the city's philosophy. Keep suffering hidden, keep surfaces beautiful, and anyone who tries to crack the marble gets crushed. Now, let's pivot to Eleanor's healing arc, because this is where the drama surprised me with tenderness. It doesn't turn into a medical melodrama. It turns into a story about trust. Eleanor is placed under the care of Dr. Sloan, and the show uses medical scenes sparingly, focusing instead on sensory triggers. Eleanor can't stand the sound of scraping. She flinches at the smell of plaster. She has nightmares where she wakes up gasping and tries to press her hand against a wall like she's checking if it's stone. Helena sleeps outside her door like a guard dog, refusing to leave her. And Eleanor resents it, not because she hates her mother, but because being watched feels like another form of being controlled. That's such a smart psychological detail. People who have been trapped often react to protection as confinement. There's a scene where Helene brings Eleanor a ball of jasmine rice, Eleanor's favorite, and Eleanor pushes it away, suddenly nauseated. Helena freezes, hurt. Eleanor whispers, "I ate dust." Helena's face collapses. She tries to apologize, but Eleanor turns her head away, and the camera holds on Helena's hand hovering in the air, unable to touch, unable to fix. I'm going to admit something that might sound strange. I loved that the show let food become a trauma symbol. It's such a domestic, everyday thing, and turning it into a reminder of imprisonment makes the horror seep into normal life. That's what trauma does. It takes the ordinary hostage. Another rehook, because we need to talk about Victor Kessler as a villain in the back half. Specifically, how the show refuses to make him a flamboyant monster and instead makes him a bureaucrat of cruelty. Victor doesn't rant. He doesn't scream. He makes calls. He issues statements. He arranges wellness checks. He has Helena's safe houses investigated for illegal medical practice. He frames Eleanor's emergence as evidence tampering. He weaponizes the law, not because he respects it, but because it's the cleanest knife. The actor playing Victor, Damien Grove, does this unnerving thing where his warmth feels like adhesive. He speaks gently while destroying you. There's a scene where he visits a hospital wing under the pretense of donating equipment, and he pauses at a nurse's station and says, smiling, "We care about the vulnerable." Then he leans in, still smiling, and whispers something to the head nurse that makes her go pale. You don't hear the words, but you see the effect. That's Victor's power. He doesn't need to be loud. He just needs to be believed. And when Victor finally appears in a direct confrontation with Helena again, at a public press event where he announces a Truth and Reconciliation initiative about misinformation The drama frames it like propaganda theater. He stands at a podium with flags behind him, smiling as he says, "We must protect our city from those who would destabilize it for personal vendettas." The camera cuts to Helena watching from a distance, eyes hard. The crowd applauds. The irony is suffocating. Now, this is where Helena's character complexity peaks for me, because she begins to realize that her money can't buy belief. She can buy airtime. She can buy lawyers. But she can't force a city to accept a truth it doesn't want. So she shifts tactics. Instead of trying to convince the crowd, she focuses on splitting Victor's coalition. She targets the donors, not with threats of exposure, because donors assume they can weather scandal, but with financial pain. She begins pulling Wale investments from institutions tied to Victor. She crashes liquidity. She turns his allies' cash flow into a hostage. It's ruthless, and the show depicts it with these cold corporate montages. Graphs, phone calls, men sweating in boardrooms, headlines about market uncertainty. It's not sexy, but it's effective storytelling because it shows how modern power wars are fought through invisible levers. But then comes the emotional backlash. Elena hears about it. Elena confronts Helena in one of the best mother-daughter scenes I've seen in a thriller drama. Because it's not sentimental. It's raw. Elena says, voice still weak. "How many people will lose their jobs because you're angry?" Helena snaps back. "How many people lost their lives because they weren't angry enough?" Elena flinches. She whispers, "I'm not your excuse." Helena's eyes widen like she's been slapped by truth. She starts to speak, then stops. For once, she has no comeback. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Because this is one of those dramas that hits harder when you let it play out on its own terms instead of turning every final turn into a checklist of reveals. My Daughter Was Hidden in a Statue is nasty, elegant, and weirdly compassionate at the same time. Horror built out of marble dust and paperwork, grief shot through museum lighting, and a mother-daughter story that refuses to be simple or comforting. I walked away shaken, angry, and genuinely impressed by how confidently it uses craft, sound, framing, performance to make you feel what erasure actually means, not just understand it. If you watched it too, tell me the moment that got under your skin the most, because I know you've got one. And if you're new here and you want more long-form, emotionally honest drama breakdowns, subscribe to Flick Flare. No pressure. Just come hang out when the next obsession drops. I'll see you in the next one.